They adopted me when I was 7. I remember the day clearly, like a photograph singed at the edges by time. The orphanage smelled of disinfectant and desperation. And I sat quietly in the corner, clutching a doll with one glass eye and no legs. The social worker knelt beside me, brushing my hair gently, her voice trembling as she introduced the couple behind her. "This is Mr. and Mrs. Delacroix," she said. "They want to take you home." Home. I barely remembered what that was. My real parents had died in a fire when I was 5. At least that's what the authorities told me. There was no funeral I could recall, no gravesite I ever visited. Just smoke, heat, and then a blur of strangers ushering me into a new life. The Delacroix were perfect on paper. Margaret was elegant with long auburn hair and lipstick always neatly applied. She smelled of roses and something clinical like bleach masked by perfume. David, her husband, had an easy smile, the kind that made grown-ups trust him instantly. His hands were large, and his grip too firm when he patted me on the shoulder that first day. I was nervous, but hopeful. To belong to someone? I wanted to be loved. Their house was a white-columned Georgian mansion nestled in the hills of New Hampshire. Act! The kind you see in magazines. Picture windows, trimmed hedges, and rooms so spotless they felt more like exhibits than living spaces. My new bedroom was pink and pristine, already prepared with stuffed animals I didn't recognize and frilly curtains I hadn't asked for. It didn't feel like mine. Nothing did. Still, I tried. I was quiet, obedient, polite. I smiled when spoken to and folded my hands like Margaret taught me. I memorized the rules posted on the refrigerator meals at 7 o'clock, reading hour at 8 o'clock. No loud noises after 9 o'clock. Always knock before entering any room that isn't yours. Good girls are silent and still, Margaret would say with a voice like sweetened venom, and we only keep good girls. The first time I slipped up, I dropped a teacup in the dining room. It wasn't intentional. My fingers were slick with sweat, and the cup shattered against the floor, a white china scream. Margaret's smile didn't fade, not at first. She simply stared at the shards, then at me, with the kind of calm that made my stomach knot. "We don't raise our voices," she said gently. "We use our hands." And then she slapped me, not hard. Not the way you'd expect. It was precise, like she'd practiced. A sting that echoed louder in the soul than the skin. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Something in her eyes told me that would make it worse. That night, I found my doll in the trash. It's the same one I'd clung to in the orphanage. Its one remaining glass eye had been gouged out. From that day forward, the house became a maze of invisible tripwires. A place where every mistake had a price, and every kindness came with conditions. David was different. He didn't punish me the way Margaret did, but his silence was heavier than her cruelty. He would watch me from the study window while I played. In the garden, his gaze sharp and unmoving, like I was a specimen in a glass tank. Sometimes he'd ask me questions, too many questions about the orphanage, about the fire, about what I remembered. I never had the answers he wanted, and each time, his disappointment was palpable. "Do you really not remember anything about that night?" he asked once, crouching beside me with a flashlight under his chin during a power outage. "No," I whispered. His lips twitched. "Not quite a smile, not quite anything. Curious," he said. "Some memories take years to resurface. When they do, it can be quite a revelation." I didn't sleep well after that. Years passed, and I learned to live within their cold, sterile world. I became the perfect daughter. Straight A's, no backtalk, no rebellion. I dressed the way Margaret preferred, nothing too loud, nothing that drew attention. She said appearances mattered, and girls who flaunted themselves invited trouble. I didn't understand what she meant until later. Much later, when I turned 16, the house became even quieter. The rules grew stricter. I wasn't allowed to close my door anymore. My phone, finally allowed after years of asking, had parental locks on everything. I couldn't talk to boys, couldn't attend sleepovers, couldn't go to school events unless Margaret drove me and waited in the parking lot the entire time. At school, I smiled. I laughed. I was popular enough to avoid suspicion, but reserved enough not to draw questions. My teachers praised me. Classmates envied my clothes, my house, my perfect family. No one ever asked what it was like behind closed doors. No one ever wondered why my hands trembled when I held a pencil too long. But secrets don't stay buried forever. It was a Thursday afternoon in October when the truth began to unravel. I had come home early from school migraine. I told the nurse and slipped inside the house quietly, hoping to nap before Margaret got back from her tennis club. The front door was unlocked. That was unusual. As I crept down the hallway, I heard voices, 2 of them, David's and someone else's, a woman. I paused by the study. The door cracked open just enough for me to see. David sat at his desk. Papers spread out before him, old photos in manila folders. Across from him sat a woman I didn't recognize, sharp gray hair, a sharp blazer, and a voice like gravel. They spoke low, but I caught enough. "She's older now," the woman said. "The resemblance is obvious. It's only a matter of time before someone else notices." "She doesn't remember anything," David replied. "We've made sure of that. She will. They always do." I pressed my palm to the wall to steady myself. "She's not like the others," the woman continued. "She survived when she shouldn't have. That's a risk. It's a dangerous one." "She's ours now," David said, his voice tightening. "And we'll deal with it ... when we have to." That night I pretended everything was normal. I smiled. Through dinner, I recited my French vocab. I thanked Margaret for the steamed vegetables I hated, but something inside me had cracked, a fracture spreading fast. That weekend. While Margaret and David were at a charity gala, I broke into the locked room at the end of the hall. It had always been off limits. No key on my ring, no explanation. Why? But the lock gave way easily when I used a bobby pin in a YouTube tutorial I'd watched in secret months earlier. Inside was darkness, dust, and a wall of filing cabinets. Rows and rows of them. I opened the nearest drawer and found names. Dozens of them. Photographs of children, adoption files, medical records, some with red slashes across the pages. Others marked processed. Then I saw mine. Eleanor Grace Callahan. Dob. June 14th, 2009. Admitted. July 21st, 2014. Classified. Type B subject resilient. Evaluation. Cognitive retention. High. Monitoring advised. Status. Phase 3. Delay. My mouth went dry. Taped to the back of the file was a photo I had never. Signed me as a child. Blood on my forehead. Soot on my cheeks. Screaming into a void of flames. The house. The fire. But I wasn't alone in the picture. Behind me was a man. Tall, dark clothes, carrying something in his arms. A body. And he wasn't saving me. He was dragging me away from the fire. That was the moment I realized. I hadn't been rescued. I'd been taken. The Delacroix weren't saviors. They were thieves. Predators. And I wasn't their first victim. I stuffed the file into my backpack and left the room as quietly as I'd entered. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't cry either. I waited. Planned. I began pretending again. This time, not to please them. This time, it was to buy time. To study their habits. To uncover the rest. I needed to know how deep their web went. And who else was caught in it. They thought they had broken me. But they had raised something much. Worse. They had raised a girl with nothing left to lose. I didn't run. That's what they would have expected. And in their world, expectations were everything. Instead, I stayed. I smiled. I did the dishes, aced my exams, and let Margaret brush my hair before bed like she used to when I was small. Enough to believe she cared. Every word I said was rehearsed, every gesture calculated. I had stepped into their gay man now. I was playing it better than they were. But beneath the stillness, I was digging. The file room had been the first crack in their fortress. I went back there twice more, always while they were out. I read every file I could without being noticed. Most were incomplete, like someone had started a report and never finished. Others were eerily thorough. Pictures, psychological notes, drug schedules. And then there were the names. I recognized some, boys and girls who had been in the orphanage with me. One by one, I saw their faces again, In the pages, Millie Ann, Casey J. Liam or Rich, one marked with a status: processed, discontinued, transferred, lost. Some were labeled success. Others, simply terminated. Whatever program I was part of, it had victims. Many. But I was alive, which meant I had a job to finish. One night, I copied 5 of the files, scanned them with my phone, and uploaded them to a secure drive. I didn't know who to trust yet, so I didn't send them anywhere. It gave me leverage, insurance, and if I ever disappeared, I wanted proof to remain behind. Then I made a mistake. It was small. I used the study printer just once, just one page. I thought it would go unnoticed. But 2 days later, David knocked on my bedroom door just after midnight. "I need to speak with you," he said. His voice was calm, but I could feel the weight. Behind it, Margaret stood behind him in her nightgown, lips painted like blood. She didn't blink. I stepped into the hallway. "What's wrong?" David didn't answer. He turned and began walking downstairs toward the basement. That was when I knew. They knew, and I followed anyway. The basement was cold, silent. It had always been locked, but tonight, the door stood open like a mouth. At the bottom of the stairs was a surgical table. Lights overhead, a camera on a tripod, shelves lined with vials and restraints, and a single chair bolted to the floor. "You've been very busy, haven't you?" Margaret said, stepping in. Behind me, her tone still falsely maternal, sneaking into rooms, reading things that weren't yours. I didn't move. "Why? What were you doing to those children?" Her face twitched. "Just for a second, we saved you," David said, stepping closer. "Your real parents were going to die anyway. The fire made it easy, clean. You were adaptable, stronger than the rest. You took me, we rescued you," Margaret snapped. "From chaos, from a world that eats weak little girls alive. We raised you into something useful." "Useful for what?" I shouted. "So you could test drugs? Monitor behavior? Build perfect little puppets?" David's hand twitched near his pocket. Syringe. I lunged before he could reach it. Slammed my foot into his knee and shoved him backward. He crashed into the tray behind him, metal clattering across the floor. Margaret screamed, charging at me with something in her hand, a scalpel. A shard of glass? Didn't wait to see. I grabbed the camera tripod and swung, cracked against her arm, and she dropped the weapon with a shriek. I ran out of the basement, through the kitchen into the woods behind the house. I didn't take a coat, didn't take shoes, just my phone and the fear pushing fire through my veins. They chased me. Of course they did. But the woods were mine in a way the house never was. I knew the gaps in the fence, the old shed behind, the neighbor's property, the way the creek curved like a trail of escape. I made it to the edge of the nearest town by dawn. The police didn't believe me, not at first. Who would? A hysterical teenager, claiming her wealthy, respected adoptive. Parents were kidnapping and experimenting on children. They almost sent me home. Until I pulled out my phone, till they saw the files and the photos and the video footage I had secretly taken from the basement. Uploaded just before I ran. The house was raided that same afternoon, but Margaret and David were gone, vanished. Like ghosts with briefcases, the authorities searched. For days, weeks, they found evidence, hidden rooms, medical equipment, forged adoption records, but no bodies, no Dalaqua. It was as if the house had shed them like old skin. They tried to hide the story, wrapped it in bureaucracy, and sealed lips. I was placed into protective custody. New guardians, new town. But I was different now. I didn't want safety. I wanted answers. So I dug deeper. The files I had copied pointed to something bigger, an underground network of families like the Delacroix hidden behind charitable fronts and fake foundations. Some were doctors. All of them obsessed with behavioral conditioning, pharmaceutical experimentation, and one disturbing phrase that kept appearing in the documents: Project Harrow. What was Harrow? No one could tell me, or maybe they wouldn't. But every breadcrumb led to another city, another name. Some of the files were decades old. Others were updated within months. It wasn't just an isolated house. It was a system, and I wasn't done. I started reaching out. Online, quietly, carefully, I found others orphans like me, adopted under strange circumstances, now grown and haunted by holes in their memory. One of them, a girl named Claire, remembered Margaret. Another boy, Jason, said he'd seen David at a medical retreat 3 states over. Just 6 months ago, we started a network. We shared names, photos, leads, and one day, Claire sent me something that turned my blood to ice. A screenshot. A flyer for a youth outreach program in Colorado, sponsored by the Harrow Foundation. And at the bottom, smiling with her perfectly painted lips, was Margaret. New name? Same face? I didn't tell the police. They'd failed me once. This was personal. I bought a bus ticket the next day, told no one. The center was nestled in the mountains, a glittering retreat for vulnerable teens, free meals, therapy, and behavioral enhancement workshops. All wrapped in benevolence. I applied as a volunteer. They accepted me within 24 hours, and there she was, Margaret, going by Dr. Ellen Marin, head of curriculum. She didn't recognize me, not at first. I had cut my hair, changed my voice, hid the rage in my eyes behind a mask of sweet compliance. But the moment came. Late one evening, she called me into her office. She stared at me across the desk, fingers laced the same poised calm she always wore like armor. "There's something familiar about you," she said. I smiled, slowly, let it unfurl like smoke. "I was hoping you'd say that." She blinked, and that's when the lights flickered. When the audio recording device I'd planted under her desk started feeding into the laptop in my bag. When the hidden camera caught her voice as I asked the right questions, every damning answer caught in perfect clarity. When Jason parked in a van outside, began uploading it all to 3 encrypted drives and a public server, she reached for the phone. I shook my head. "It's too late, Margaret." Or should I say, Dr. Marin. Her face finally cracked. Smooth porcelain mask fractured into panic. But I wasn't there for revenge. Not the kind she thought, anyway. I stood. "You taught me how to be a ghost. I'll return the favor." By morning, the building was swarmed. FBI, journalists, survivors. Some of the kids had already vanished, no doubt moved by someone higher up. But we had enough. Margaret was arrested. David was still out there. But not for long, because I knew. Something dangerous. They had taken everything from me, my past, my parents, my peace. But they had made one mistake. They raised me to be quiet, to be still, to be obedient. And now, it's none of those things. Now, I was the storm they never saw coming.